let me tell you something that happened at what was supposed to be the most beautiful day of my sister's life, and turned into the day my entire family finally saw who my parents really were. But before I get there, I need you to understand something. I need you to feel what I felt. Because this isn't just a story about a penthouse. This isn't just a story about a wedding. This is a story about a child who spent 23 years trying to be enough, and one woman, 81 years old, silver-haired and sharp as a blade, who decided that enough was enough. Stay with me. Because what my grandmother did in that reception hall, in front of 240 guests, a 7-tier cake and a string quartet, is something I will never forget as long as I live. My name is Daniel, I'm 34 years old, and I own a penthouse apartment in the heart of Chicago. I want to say that casually, the way I've learned to say it, but the truth is, I earned that penthouse with blood. Not literally, but the kind of blood that comes from working 80-hour weeks in your mid-20s, eating ramen at a desk while your college friends were out at bars, saying no to vacations, to relationships, to rest, because you had a vision and you refused to let it die. I built a software company from a laptop in my one-bedroom apartment when I was 26. By 30, we had 40 employees. By 32, we were acquired. And by 33, I moved into a 3-bedroom penthouse on the 47th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows and a terrace that overlooks Lake Michigan. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what it meant to me. That penthouse wasn't just a home. It was proof. It was the physical, tangible, undeniable proof that I had made it, that everything I had sacrificed had been worth it, that Daniel, the quiet kid who was always overshadowed by his louder, more charming sister, had built something real and solid and his. And my parents wanted to take it from me. Let me tell you about my family. My parents, Richard and Carol, are the kind of people who have mastered the art of presentation. They look wonderful at parties, they say the right things. They give the right compliments. My mother wears pearls and my father tells stories that make everyone laugh. From the outside, they look like the American dream. A loving couple, 2 successful children, a golden life. But love, when it comes with conditions, isn't love. It's a transaction. And I didn't understand that until I was much older. Growing up, my sister Vanessa was the favorite. Not cruelly, not obviously, but in the way that parents sometimes choose a child to pour themselves into. She was the one they talked about at dinner parties, the one they drove 2 hours to watch perform in school plays, the one they introduced first when meeting new people. This is Vanessa and this is Daniel. That order. Always that order. I learned early to be quiet about it, to just work harder, to be so undeniably successful that there would be no way to overlook me. And when the acquisition happened and the money came in, real money, life-changing money, I watched something shift in my parents' eyes. They started calling more, visiting more, being warmer, more interested, more invested in who I was becoming. And God help me, I loved it. I was 32 years old and I still wanted my parents to be proud of me. So I let myself believe that their newfound warmth was genuine, that the success had just given us a new language to speak to each other, that we were finally connecting. I should have known better. Vanessa got engaged to a man named Patrick about a year after my acquisition. Patrick is a good man, genuinely good, the kind of steady, warm-hearted person that Vanessa had always needed to balance out her fire. The wedding was planned for the following summer, a grand, elaborate affair that my parents threw themselves into with a kind of obsessive joy. I was happy for her, really. Whatever complicated feelings existed between Vanessa and me, and there were some, quiet and unspoken, I wanted her to be happy. So when she asked me to speak at the wedding, I said yes. When she asked if the rehearsal dinner could be held in my penthouse, I said yes to that too. And here is where I should have seen the first crack. The rehearsal dinner was magnificent. My housekeeper Elena and I spent 2 days preparing. I hired a catering company, had the terrace strung with lights, bought flowers that cost more than my first car. 40 guests came up to my 47th floor and stood on my terrace and looked out at Chicago glittering beneath them, and they gasped. Every single one of them gasped. My mother looked around at the space, at the custom kitchen, the art on the walls, the view that went on forever, and I saw something move across her face that I didn't have a name for yet. After the dinner, after most guests had left, my father pulled me aside. He put his hand on my shoulder, the way he does when he wants something, and he said, "Daniel, this place is extraordinary. You know, your mother and I have been thinking, we're in that house in Oak Park, and it's getting to be too much for us. All those stairs, the maintenance. We were wondering if maybe, just maybe, you'd consider letting us move in here." I thought he was joking. I actually laughed. He was not joking. "We could take the main bedroom," he said, as if the logistics were the only thing to sort out. "You could find yourself a nice place closer to the office. Younger, more minimal. This is a family kind of space, Daniel. It shouldn't be just one person rattling around in it." I told him I'd think about it, which was my way of saying no without starting a war the night before my sister's wedding. But my father heard "I'll think about it" as probably yes. The wedding was held at a vineyard about an hour outside the city. It was stunning. Rolling hills, late summer light, Vanessa in a dress that made everyone cry. I gave my speech and I meant every word of it. I talked about what it meant to watch your sibling find their person, about the kind of love that looks like partnership, about Patrick being exactly who she needed. People applauded. Vanessa cried. Patrick mouthed, "Thank you," from the altar. It was a perfect moment. And then the reception began. We were seated at a round table near the front. My parents, my grandmother Nora, two of Vanessa's friends, Patrick's parents, and me. Grandmother Nora sat beside me and she reached over and squeezed my hand before we even sat down properly. She's 81, but she has the grip of a woman who has survived things, and she has. She raised 3 children while working full-time, buried a husband, outlasted hard seasons with the kind of grace that I have always found awe-inspiring. She leaned over to me during the salad course and said quietly, "You look tense, my love." I told her I was fine. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me. My mother, 2 seats away, was on her second glass of champagne and loosening up the way she does, becoming louder, warmer, more performative, and then, in that particular way that slightly drunk people say things they've been thinking for a long time, she turned to Patrick's mother, a lovely woman named Susan, and said, "Of course, Daniel's Penthouse is where we'll be hosting Christmas from now on. It's really become the family hub." I set down my fork. Patrick's mother smiled pleasantly. "Oh, how wonderful! You all share it?" "Well, we're in discussions," my mother said, waving her hand. "Daniel's been very generous about it. It's a family home, really." And something inside me, something that had been quietly bending for years, went very, very still. I said calmly but clearly, "Mom, that's not accurate. The Penthouse is my home. There are no discussions." I said I'd think about it, and I've thought about it. The answer is no. The table went quiet, not just our table. The tables nearby, that particular silence that happens when something true is said in a room that has grown accustomed to comfortable lies. My father's jaw tightened. My mother blinked, recalibrated, and then did what she always does. She laughed lightly and said, "Daniel, we're at your sister's wedding, can we not do this here?" As if she hadn't started it, as if I were the one creating a scene. And my father leaned forward, his voice low and with an edge I knew well from childhood, and he said, "You have more money than you'll ever use, Daniel. We're your parents. We gave you everything. The least you could do, Richard." It was one word, spoken quietly, with a weight that comes from 8 decades of having earned the right to be heard. Everyone turned to look at Grandmother Nora. She didn't raise her voice. That's the thing I want you to understand. She didn't need to. Grandmother Nora sat very straight in her chair, placed her champagne glass down with a small, deliberate click, and looked at my father with eyes that I can only describe as ancient and absolutely unafraid. "You will not do this today," she said. "You will not do this to my grandson at his sister's wedding, or anywhere else. And since we are all here, and since you have apparently decided that honesty is on the table, I think it is time we are all honest." My father opened his mouth. She held up one finger, and he closed it. "I have watched you," she said, "for 30 years. Treat this boy as an afterthought. I have watched you pour yourselves into Vanessa, and I love Vanessa. She knows I love her. But I have watched Daniel work himself half to death trying to earn something from you that you should have given him freely. And when he finally finally, built something magnificent on his own, with no help from you, you saw it and the first thing you thought was how to make it yours." She paused. The string quartet had stopped playing. I don't know if they could hear or if they simply sensed something shifting, but the music had stopped and there was only her voice. "I want to tell everyone at this table something," she continued, and her voice carried with the kind of natural authority that cannot be taught. "When Daniel was 26, he called me. Not his parents. Me. He called me to tell me he was starting his company, and he was scared and he wanted to know if I thought he could do it, and I told him yes. Because I knew. I have always known what this boy was capable of, because I actually paid attention." She looked at my mother then. A long, quiet look. "Carol, you told me last month that you hoped Daniel would do the right thing about the apartment. I told you then that Daniel always does the right thing, and that the right thing was not what you were imagining. You didn't listen, so I'm saying it here, where you cannot pretend you didn't hear it. That penthouse belongs to Daniel. It was bought with Daniel's money, built on Daniel's sacrifice, and it is Daniel's home, and if either of you say another word about it today, or any other day, you will answer to me." Silence. Complete, total, ringing silence. And then Patrick's father, who I had met exactly twice, began to applaud. Slowly at first, and then Susan joined in, and then Vanessa's friends, and I will never forget this, Vanessa herself, my sister, who had tears on her cheeks, stood up and began to clap. My mother was the color of chalk, my father stared at the table, and grandmother Nora picked up her champagne glass, looked at me and said very softly, "Just for me, you are always the one I was proudest of." I should have said it louder, sooner. I'm saying it now. I am a 34-year-old man who built a company from nothing. I have sat across from venture capitalists and hard-nosed negotiators and people who wanted to take everything I'd built. I have held myself together through all of it. I could not hold myself together in that moment. I didn't even try. What happened after is something that still moves in me when I think about it. Vanessa came to find me during the first dance. She pulled me aside, out through a side door where the vineyard stretched out into the dark, and she said, "I knew, Daniel, I always knew they were harder on you." I didn't say anything because I didn't know how. "I'm sorry," and I believed her. Because Vanessa, for all the complicated history between us, is not a bad person. She was also just a kid once, shaped by the same parents, doing the best she could with what she understood. We stood in the dark outside her wedding reception, and we talked for 20 minutes about things we'd never said out loud. And it was like watching a window get opened in a room that had been sealed for years. She went back inside to her husband. I stood there for a moment longer, looking up at the sky, thinking about what my grandmother had said, about being the one she was proudest of, about paying attention. I want to tell you something about what it feels like to be seen. I mean really seen, not for what you have or what you've achieved, but for who you are and what it cost you to become that. It feels like being handed something you didn't know was missing, like a key for a door you'd forgotten was locked. My grandmother gave me that at my sister's wedding, in front of 240 people and a string quartet that had stopped playing to listen. In the weeks that followed, things shifted. My parents were quiet in the way that people are quiet when they have been called out and have not yet decided what to do with that. My father sent a short text saying he had overstepped, and that he hoped we could move forward. My mother called and cried and made it somehow, mostly about herself, but there was something in there, underneath the performance, that felt like an actual reckoning. Like she was, for perhaps the first time, looking at something uncomfortable and not entirely looking away. I don't know what the future holds with them. I'm not going to tell you we all healed instantly and had a beautiful Christmas in my penthouse and forgave everything. Life is not a 30-minute television episode. Healing between people, when it happens at all, is slow and non-linear and full of setbacks. But I know that something changed. Something that cannot be unchanged. Because certain truths, once spoken aloud in rooms full of people, cannot be stuffed back into silence. My grandmother understood that. She has always understood that the most powerful thing a person can do is simply refuse to pretend. She called me the Monday after the wedding. I was on my terrace with coffee, watching the lake, when her name came up on my phone. "How are you?" she asked. "Better," I said. "Really better." She made a small sound of satisfaction, the way she does. And then she said, "You know I meant every word." "I know, Grandma." "Good," she said. "Now tell me what you're working on next." And just like that, we moved forward, because that's what she does. She names the thing that needs to be named, she handles what needs to be handled, and then she moves forward. She doesn't marinate in drama. She doesn't require the people she loves to keep circling back to thank her. She just loves, with both hands, fully, without keeping score. I hope I'm half the person she is when I'm 81. I still live in the penthouse. I wake up in the morning and I make coffee and I stand at those floor-to-ceiling windows and I look out at Chicago, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes, I think about the kid who was 26 and scared and called his grandmother because she was the one who always picked up, and I think about how that kid turned out okay. More than okay. I think about what it means to build something truly your own. Not just in the material sense, the apartment, the company, the financial security, but in the deeper sense, the identity, the knowledge of who you are when the approval is withheld, when the recognition doesn't come, when you have to move forward on faith in yourself alone, because no one else is clapping yet. That is the real thing I built, and no one can take it from me.